All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our Intro to Web Dev workshop. This is one of the free hackathon workshops for teaching you the essential skills in building your very first website for a hackathon. My name is Alvin. I am currently a sponsorship coordinator here at nwPlus, and today I am joined with
Yojin. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm the cmd-f logistics coordinator, and I'm also a fourth year computer science major.
We also have a couple of lovely TAs that will be joining us today. Feel free to raise your hand up just to signify who you are. They'll be walking around and helping you in case you have any questions. So if you get stuck or anything, feel free to raise your hand up and they should be able to come over and answer your questions. Before we get started, I'll just like to acknowledge that our nwPlus would like to acknowledge that our initiatives take place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And here is the table of contents that we'll be going over today. We'll be going over HTML and CSS. And during these parts, we'll also be giving you time in between for you to work on your own code. So a couple of prerequisites. We recommend that you use VS Code if you haven't done so already. Download the images on the Notion page that we'll be using in a demo, as well as the VS Code Live server extension. And you can refer all of these in our Notion page. All right, so what exactly is web development? So web development is essentially this process of creating, maintaining, and developing websites. Some of the most common technologies that are used in web development are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But for today, we'll be teaching you HTML and CSS. So the plan for today is to create this little travel guide that's built using HTML and CSS. And right now, I know it looks kind of intimidating, but trust me, it's much, much simpler than it looks. We'll be able to guide you throughout this process, and you'll have plenty of TAs to help you along this process as well. All right, now I'll pass it over to Yojin, who will be teaching everyone HTML.
Hey, okay, thanks, Alvin. So let's first talk about what HTML is. So HTML is short for Hypertext Markup Language. So it just provides the overall structure of a file. So it's like the skeleton, so the title, any text, any hyperlinks, tables, lists, pictures, everything goes in here. Yeah, so HTML files are just a bunch of tags. Tags are essentially functions that have different purpose. So you can say, I want this to be a list, or I want this to be an image. And we can just use it by putting the tag name inside of angled brackets, and then you can add the contents, and then do a slash, and then tag again. So this whole sandwich of tag, contents, and tag is the element. So next is the doc type tag. So the file, well, actually, before we get started, so for an HTML file, the file extension is HTML. The boilerplate includes the doc type tag, which indicates to the browser that you should expect an HTML file. And next is the HTML tag. So this just contains everything that you'll be writing in the future. So for the boilerplate, you should have the doc type, HTML, head, and body tags. And then the HTML tag should wrap everything after doc type, and then should end at the last line of your code. The head tag. So the head tag provides the metadata, which is data about the HTML file. So an example is the title tag, which changes the name of the tab on a browser. And next is the body tag, and this is where you're going to put all the contents of the website, so including texts, images, hyperlinks, tables, lists, and anything else you want to see on your website. And let's talk about how to add text. There's a few options for adding text. So you can use a header or a paragraph. So headers are large text that introduces a page or a section. And the title page is usually the H1 header, which is header 1, and it's the largest size. So as the number increases, the text gets smaller. And any other texts, you can just use the P tag, that stands for paragraph. And this isn't bolded or anything, so you can just use it whenever and wherever you want. Lists. So you can add a bullet point to a list using the LI tag. And if you want to make the list an unordered list, you can wrap it using a UL tag for unordered list. And to make it an ordered list, you can use the OL, and this will tag it by saying 1, 2, 3. And images, this is probably the more important and exciting parts of HTML. So images use the img tag, and it has a few attributes called source and alt. So the source attribute specifies where the image is, and the alternate text is a simple text description of the image in case the image doesn't render or for improved accessibility. And there's 2 ways to add an image, local or global. The local way is just specifying that your image is from your local device, and we're going to be using this today. And the global images, you just link something from the internet. So you can also add hyperlinks to your image. Anything inside of the A tag is hyperlinked. So this will include images and text, so you can even hyperlink images. And the href attribute inside of the A tag is where the destination URL is. So by default, it loads the hyperlink in the current tab. It can also say target equals blank to open it in a new tab. And lastly, div is a box element that acts as a container for your elements. We'll talk about them in a little bit more detail later, but just know that they're really useful for organizing elements in one section together. So far, does anyone have any questions?
All right, perfect.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, now it's your time to follow along. And yeah, we'll pass it off to Alvin.
All right, so does everyone have VS Code ready? We're gonna start coding. See the screen. All right, so here is our VS Code, and we have here the images that we've had dragged on earlier from the prerequisites page. So first, let's start by creating the boiler point of the website. So let's create a new HTML file, and we'll call that index.html. And to create this boiler point, VS Code has a shortcut where if you just enter exclamation mark followed by enter, it should generate a boiler point for the HTML file. Does everyone have that? Does everyone have that jotted down? Exclamation mark enter would generate the bullet points. Okay, sounds good. Next, let's see our HTML file in action. So if you installed the live server option, this could be found in the extensions tab of the VS Code. We already have it installed already, but if you haven't done so, please install it right now. On the bottom right corner of the VS Code, there's an option that says go live. Let's press on that. That should generate entirely new websites that should open up a new web page that references our HTML file. I don't think it shows up.
Oh, this.
Awesome. All right, let's start off by actually modifying the HTML file. We'll go to the title tag, and let's rename this to be cmd-f travel guide 2020. So if we press save, it should show up. And as you can see on the tab, it says cmd-f travel guide 2024. So it actually modifies the tab name of our web page. Now that's done, let's start adding some content.
Sorry, do you have a question? Yeah, no worries. Do you want to explain it again?
Yeah, so if you can see on the bottom right corner of your VS Code, there's an option that says go live.
Oh.
Yeah. So if you just press on that, it'll launch a new web page that references the HTML file.
Did that work? Folder?
Okay, yeah.
Wait.
Can one of the TAs go and
Yeah.
make sure he's on the right track? Okay. All right. Does anyone else have questions before we continue? Okay.
Give it.
Seems like everyone,
Okay.
we can take a pause here. We can take a Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, we go back to the thing. Oh, okay, now, yeah, but go back to the. I think it's not a very tall. It's fairly. I need your. You're on.
It should be in the pre-app. It's also Discord.
Okay.
I know you didn't do you, but is it?
So,
I don't want to create the keys file. And let everything in there.
I think you close this.
okay, so it's. We're just thinking, we see it would be very useful,
Yeah.
right?
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah. Or.
Is anyone else having issues with the find a folder? Open folder.
Thank you. I think it's just put the.
Yes. Is it with the open folder thing with the live server? Oh, okay, no worries.
Okay, one of the TAs. All right. Excellent. All right, is everyone good? Are we good to proceed? All right, I think that's a yes. All right. Okay, so if you really modify the title to cmd-f travel guide 2024, we're gonna move on to the next step where we're gonna be start to add content to the body tag of the HTML file. So let's start by adding a header. So we add a header by specifying the h1 tag, and here let's name it your command f travel guide, just like what was shown in the slide. So once that's done, if you press save, you should see your command f travel guide show up on the web page. Does everyone have that Done as well. We're good to move on. All right. Now let's start adding some descriptions. So we'll start by using a p tag. And then once we're given a p tag, let's add a quick slogan and let's say, where will your journey take you next? Just like what's shown slide. All right, that's done. Below the p tag, let's create another section and let's add h2 header element and let's call it that. Let's name that what we do. Let's wait for everyone to catch up. And instead of a p tag this time, let's actually add a list. So let's use the UL element because we want an unordered list. So UL stands for unordered. And inside of the UL tag, let's add a bunch of bullet points. So we add bullet points by specifying the li tag. So in the first bullet point, let's say we will create your own custom itinerary. And then in the second bullet point, let's just say 100% satisfaction guarantee. All right, does everyone, no trouble so far? Any questions, anything like that? I'll wait for everyone to catch up. Seems like everyone's sold. Okay, sounds good. All right. Lastly, let's add some images that we have downloaded earlier from our prerequisites page. Let's add an image tag and let's insert it right below our p tag. So in this image tag, let's start by adding the alt attribute. And let's name that image of plane. So you would see, as you can see on the webpage, it says image of plane because we don't actually have an image yet. So that's just the ultimate attribute that's being used right now. And so to actually render the image, we would use, I think it's the href tag, right?
SRC. SRC.
All right, the source tag. All right, so we use a source tag, and as you can see on the left-hand side, we have plane.jpg. So we're just gonna use that exact file name, and we're going to add that into a source. And I can see on our left side, the image is displayed on the web page. All right, that's it for now. We'll give you a couple of minutes for you to wrap things up. And yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna change that in a bit. Yeah, it will be massive. Once you get the image done, could you just raise your hand for a second? Okay, perfect. Nice. And the TAs will circulate. So if you want to ask any questions, then this is the time to do so.
All right, is everyone, okay, can you hear me?
Good.
All right. All right, so we have finished our webpage. Uh, but right now it kind of looks like a mess. I mean, as you can see, like the image is like really big. So how can we fix this? So pay attention to the slides now. We're now going to talk about CSS. So what is exactly a CSS? So CSS, also styling for cascade styling sheets, is a way for you to apply styling to your HTML tags. So you can, for example, change the font of the text. You can add color to it. You can adjust the spacing. So you can do a lot of things with the HTML text. Let's start off by introducing the CSS syntax. So here we have this block of text. What does each of these mean? So H1 stands for the header that we specified earlier in HTML file. We call that selector. So we essentially select that HTML element in our CSS. And we followed up by the property. So that's exactly the property that we want to change. In this case, we want to modify the color of the H1 element. And lastly, we just have the value. So this is the desired value that we want to change. So this entire CSS syntax means that we want to change the H1 header element to have the color red. So how exactly do we connect these HTML elements to CSS? So the first method, as I talked about in the previous slide, is called an element selector. So an element selectors use the HTML tag to decide which HTML element to apply the styles to. So as you can see, we have the H2 elements and the P elements, and I want to add the color yellow to the H2 elements and the color pink to the P elements. And as you can see below in the CSS file, I've changed the background color to be yellow for the H2 and the color pink for the P text. Next up, we also have the class selectors. So these are useful for selecting HTML elements individually. So say, for example, I wanted to modify the H2 and the P element for the first two to both have the same color. In this case, I've added this class name and I've named it Alvin. And this will modify the first two H2 and P elements. And I've done the same for Yojin, in which the bottom two H2 and P elements would have the color green. Does anyone have any questions so far? All right. All right, lastly, let's talk about how you will link this CSS file to HTML. The first way is to use the inline method. So for each HTML tag, there is an attribute that's called style, which allows you to actually input the CSS styling within the HTML tag itself. This is pretty ineffective. It's pretty tedious. It'll take you a long time for you to add up the styling. So there's another way called adding internally. So HTML also provides a styling tag that allows you to input the CSS syntax into the styling tag as well. But the method that we're going to be teaching you today is adding externally, where you will create a separate styles.css file with all your CSS in it, and you would use that CSS file and you will link it to the HTML file. All right, walk through time. We're going to show you how you would turn the website that we had before into something like this. All right, so please pull up the VS Code that you had earlier. Okay, so let's begin in the VS Code by adding a new file. Let's call that styles.css. Give a couple seconds for people to type up. Does everyone have the file created? All right. That's okay. Now that we've created the styles.css file, let's go back to the index.html and let's actually link the HTML file to our CSS file. So below the tag, let's add the link tag that we specified earlier. And we'll add rel that's equals style sheet as a relation to the CSS, and we'll add the href as the link, and href will specify that to be styles.css. All right. So the first thing we want to fix is the plain size. Looks pretty big, so we're going to go back to the styles.css. And as I talked about earlier, we're going to implement the element selector. So, let's go back to the index.html file and let's add a class name and let's call that plain. So this will be using the class selector. All right, going back to styles.css, we'll use the plain selector. So a class selector has appeared in front of the selector to specify that it's a class. And inside this plain CSS selector, let's change the width because it looks kind of big now. So let's change the width to be 50%. And there you go. The image is looks much better on the web page. Does anyone have any questions? All right, let's give us a couple of minutes for. So all we modified so far in the HTML file is the link tag, and then we've also added a class as part of our class selector for our CSS file. So make sure you have those two down and the HTML file, and in the CSS file, could you go to CSS file? We just added a very simple selector to change the size of our image. Okay, let's carry on. So now that we can see the whole page, let's change the background color and the font. To change the backgrounds, let's use the body selector. And since it's element selector, we don't need the period for it. And let's add the background color to be light blue. So you can see the background now has changed to light blue. Then let's change the font on this website. So in the font family property, let's add a core new monospace. So as you can see here, the background color for blue has been added and the font has been changed to a core new monospace. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, next let's increase the text size. So we'll use the font size attribute to change the text size to 20 pixels. So now as you see, the font has been increased. And I don't like the fact that everything's on the side. So let's center the text. So going back to the VS Code, there's an option for you to align your text by using text align. And let's change that to center. So notice that the image is also centered when you use text align as well. So if you can scroll down on the web page, you can see that the bullet points are also on the side. So we want to center those as well. Let's change the display structure of the list. So let's use the UL selector to be display and as a property. And then in the value, let's add that to be inline block. And now you should see the bullet points have been centered. And We can also add the text to be left. So let's add text align left on the bullet points as well. Okay, nice. Should be good now. All right, and let's make the title a bit bigger too. So going back to the H1 elements, let's increase the font size to be 50 pixels. So now this looks pretty promising. Looks pretty similar to the one that's shown on the slide. Does anyone have any questions? We'll give you 5 minutes to wrap up your code, and I've asked any questions to our wonderful TAs. It's just something to do, just to do it like that. Yeah, it looks resilient. Turn on
talking.
the workshop. I mean, what's the microphone doing? Turn on. Yeah. Okay. So now we have a pretty solid website to describe our product. But what if we wanted to add a sample schedule to add more credibility? We can add another page that does just that. So let's add a hyperlink to a new page. Let's use the A tag, load a P tag to create a new link. So let's, in the inside of the A tag, let's add the href attributes and let's add schedule.html. And inside the content of our tag, let's call that sample schedule. Yeah. So if you click the link on the web page now, it shows up a new page, but the schedule.html has not been created yet, which is exactly what should happen. So now let's start creating the schedule.html page. As usual, let's create the boilerplate by using exclamation mark followed by enter. That should generate a new boilerplate for our new HTML file. All right, so it's now your turn. So I want you to recreate what we have learned so far and recreate what we have done in the slides. So here we have an example schedule followed by an image below, and we also have day 1 and day 2. We're going to give you 10 minutes to work on this HTML portion. If you needed help, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll be walking around. And yes, and yeah, we'll leave it to it.
Yeah, and for the CSS, feel free to link it to the same style sheet that we used before. So that'll just be the same thing here. And the images and the bullet points are all on the resource file, so you don't have to rewrite anything. You can also find the images right there. And for the names, if you need any pointers as to what to name them, they're right here.
So as a start, I really recommend you reference back to the index.html file. Most of what you need to know is in this file. So if so to create the schedule HTML file, like I said, you can start off by updating the title, and then once you update the title, you can then start modifying the body tag to create the header elements, followed by the bullet points. I recommend working from top to bottom. So like, as you can see here, we have the example schedule followed by the image below and following that by a block of text. So just work from top to bottom and it will be a lot easier for you to complete this web page through this method. Yeah, so I recommend you work from top to bottom. So like, as you can see, we have the example schedule as our title, and then we followed up by an image below and then a block of text below. So I really recommend that you just work from top to bottom, and then you can follow that up by completing day 1 and then lastly completing day 2. So this is kind of more like a 3-step process.
Oh, excuse me. Could you shift a little bit? I think you're covering the thing. Yeah. Thank you.
You don't need to pre, I guess a tab with you right now. It's like you have to copy and paste it from the principal. Yeah. It's the type right. Just FYI, the bullet points are also listed in the prerequisite page, so you don't have to directly copy it down. Okay, well, it's nice to get twice words. All right, now let's go over a solution. All right, so starting from the boilerplate from the schedule HTML file.
Okay, it's me going over the solution. Okay, let's go over the solution. Starting from the boilerplate, we're gonna add a title to the metadata. So we're just gonna call this example schedule. And then we're gonna link it to the CSS to make it all nice and pretty. Just gonna copy this over. So link, everything's the same, and then you should be able to see that if we click the link, it should be blue. So that's good. Okay. And for the body, we can also heavily reference the index.html that we worked together for last time. And let's copy over everywhere from the title all the way to the links. So let's do title to the image, like that. Yeah, so you should get this exact image, which is exactly the same. So we're gonna just change it up a little bit. The title will change it to example schedule. And then we'll keep the slogan the same because we're the same company. And we're going to change the image from plain.jpg to sailboat.jpg and then .png. And then we're also just going to change the alternate text and also the class. So it should look like this right now. Could I get a thumbs up if you're here? Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and then last thing, we're just gonna change the link. So right now what happens is if you click the link, it just directs it to itself. We're gonna just link it to index.html, which is going to go back to main page. So if you click the link now, it should take you back to the main page. Okay. And we'll just group the day 1 and day 2 together by a div because they're really similar. So it's just a title, image, and a list. We're just gonna do div. So it's gonna be day 1, and then div gonna be day 2. We'll ignore this for now. So we're just gonna focus on day 1 for now. So we're gonna add the header. It's gonna just be called h2 day 1 set sail. And then, oops, so let me go back. Day 1 set sail. And then we're gonna add an image. So we're gonna use the image tag, and then we're just gonna do source, islands, and then alternate text will just be islands. Image. So this should add a new image of the islands. It's really big right now, but it doesn't really matter. We'll change it later. And then we're going to add a list. Last time we used an unordered list so that we can have bullet points. Right now we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this means that we're gonna use the ordered list. And then I'm gonna make a list item. And then from the prereq page, I'm just gonna copy and paste all of these. Okay. So now you should be able to see all of the bullet points here with the numbers. It's also aligned wrong, but it doesn't matter. We'll change it later. And then for this div for day 1, we're just gonna add a simple class called schedule. So this is gonna come in handy later. We're just gonna make some styling changes later, but we're just gonna put the class schedule. And then, yeah, okay. So how about we do the styles right now? So first, let's change the image. So the image here is really big. So let's just give it a class, schedule image. And then we're just going to use this to change the size of the image. So make a class selector, schedule image, and do width, I don't know, let's do like 700 pixels. Okay. And then similarly, let's do something with the sailboat. So we already have a class. And let's just do sailboat with 500 pixels. So now the sailboat is also smaller. And the list. So right now the list, it's also to the left. And remember that we changed the bullet points in the main page to make it so that it's not all in the left. You can actually just put a comma and apply it to both UL and OL. So if you just make it apply to both of them, then when you save, it should just work and look like this. Okay, so day 1 is complete. Could we get a thumbs up if you need a bit more time as well? Just a couple more minutes. More time, okay. Okay, for day 2, We're gonna be doing the exact same thing, but with a couple different images. So this just means that we're gonna be, we can honestly just copy and paste this. And we can change the title to Day 2 Inland Adventures. And then change the image to woodland. And change the alternate text. Oops. And then for the bullet points, we can again change it to the one in the resources. Okay. And the website should look like this by now. So it should have two images, have things side by side. Don't worry if I'm going too fast. The solutions are up on the GitHub page. If you're able to, if you go to the branches, it should have everything. We just wanted to cover everything that we have so far. Yeah, and then we'll move on to the next part, the Flexbox, and then we'll hand it over to Alvin. Yep.
Slides.
This one.
All right, so now let's talk about some more advanced versions of CSS. So each HTML element contains this sort of concept called the box model. So the box model contains the content, followed by the padding, followed by the border, and followed by the margin. So the box model is essentially used for you to kind of adjust spacing between or within your HTML element. So the margin is actually used to adjust the spacing between HTML elements, and the border is used to differentiate your HTML elements between other HTML elements. And lastly, the padding is used to increase the spacing within your own HTML elements between the border and the actual content of your HTML element. This is sort of an example that I gave on the right, where I increased the padding and the margin to kind of like adjust the spacing of a div block. Another concept is called Flexbox. So Flexbox is this sort of layout model where it will make the best use of space in your web page without you actually having to manually enter the margin or the padding or manually adjust the spacing. So as you can see in the animation, if you were to expand on the browser, the HTML elements will also expand as well. This is great if you want to group multiple div blocks together. We will show this in action later. So one component of the Flexbox is this sort of concept called the flex direction. And so flex direction is actually used to determine how your HTML elements are actually being displayed. By default, the HTML elements, if you choose to use Flexbox, will be displayed in this row format, where, as you can see, the HTML elements are aligned side by side. But if you wanted to make it so that HTML elements are aligned from top to bottom, you would change the flex direction to be column. So let's walk through again how we would implement this in our own HTML solution.
Thanks, Alvin. So far we've just been laying our text and images in order from top to bottom and to side by side. But what if we want to have the 2 days, so day 1 and day 2, side by side like this, right? So if you see the picture on the left, this is what we have right now, but I would like for it to be right next to each other so that you can see both of them at the same time without scrolling. So remember how the div containing day 1 and day 2 have the class schedule? So we're going to use that to put them in a flex display mode. So looking at the website now, it doesn't really look that appealing. It's because by default, the flex is organizing everything by row or sideways. So we want to do everything by column. So let's just add a schedule selector. And in the schedule selector, let's add display flex. So this is going to declare that we want to use a flex box. And then we're going to follow that by flex direction column. So what this is doing is it's just putting everything in one row by row. So it's going to put everything vertically. But this also still doesn't look like the reference image. So we need to put day 1 and day 2 side by side. So how can we do this? So what if we wrapped these 2 images into another div? So we're going to use a flex box for day 1 and day 2 in a horizontal display. So let's make a new div. And we're going to move the 2 divs inside. So we're going to surround the day 1 and day 2 divs by a new div. Okay, and let's name this div box with the class schedule list. So this is just a list of schedules. Thanks. And then in style CSS, we're going to add a schedule list selector. And then we're going to again set the display to flex. And by default, remember that the direction is row, so we can just leave it as is. You can add flex direction row, but that's going to be redundant unless you want to make it very explicit. And we want to have them centered. It doesn't really look like it right now, but if you were to have a bigger screen or have a different screen size, it's going to be aligned to the left. So we want to make it centered, and to do that, we're going to use the justifies content centered. So it's going to make everything centered. And you can see that on the example image that we have here, the day 1 and day 2, they're separated a little bit. And here in our code, they're right next to each other. So we're going to use the box model that we talked about before. And we're going to add a margin of 20 pixels in the schedule selector. So this is going to add 20 pixels around each of the divs. Nice. Is everyone able to get to this part? Okay, so let me just go over what just happened. So let's go back to the slides and I'll explain this in a little more detail. Okay, so what has happened? First, this is our website before using the Flexbox. So if you look at inspect element, you can just, there's an option to see the box model of every single element that you have. So here's a space that the H2 title takes up. And here's a space that the image takes up. This is for the list, and this is for the whole list. This is called schedule. And then after we set the flex direction column, we can see that in the blue dotted line by the arrow, this means that the image is taken up the whole line, and the list is forced to move below the image instead of next to it. And after we wrap day 1 and day 2 divs by schedule list, each of the scheduled divs should look the same, but just a little narrower because it's just put side by side. So day 1 and then day 2. And the scheduled div has a display flex. So it places these 2 containers side by side. So it just thinks of this one day as one item. So it doesn't care about the inner details of day 1. It doesn't care about where the image is, where the title is, where the list is. It just thinks of that one div as one block. So then it's able to put these blocks side by side. So yeah, this is the Flexbox, and it's one of the most essential ways to organize your website. And yeah, I'm sure you're going to use these in your project if you decide to make a web dev. So what did we learn today? So for HTML, we learned the HTML basics, like the structure, tag elements. We used the live server. We learned some essential tags like div, header, paragraph, hyperlinks, images, and we also added classes to tags. And for CSS, we learned a couple basics like selecting elements and classes. We changed the background color, font family, and font size. We changed the image width using pixels and also percent of the page. And we used inline block display in lists. We also used a box model, and we learned about the flex boxes and flex direction. Yeah, so here's a quick summary of resources that we recommend. We will release the slides after the workshop. And our solution is on our GitHub. That's also on the resources site.
So thank you for coming. We hope you learned a little bit about web development today. Yeah,